session and back in open session. And is there a motion to consider these findings of fact, to approve them?
I have the proposed copy of the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and I will circulate a copy for signature.
But
I make a motion to approve these
Right.
findings of fact and
Right.
conclusions of law.
Okay, and is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, Ryan Mason seconds. All right, any discussion further? Okay, I think all those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? Any abstentions? So it's unanimous. So then you want to circulate that? So we sign it. Oh my goodness, that's right. We should have a person who does that. It should be in a. So I think, oh, there we go. No. I think it would be, okay, here we go. Okay, and dated, should I date it? What do you think today is? 3/28/2022. Yes, I give to Mary. And I think it would help, I think, if at this point, the document we just agreed to is read out loud. Is anybody willing to do that? Does that be good?
I will do that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is this on? Yeah. This is in re the ethics complaint against Alderperson Deborah Ryan. These are the findings of facts and conclusions of law. The City of Wausau Ethics Board submits the following findings of facts and conclusions of law. Findings of facts. Number 1. By letter dated December 7, 2021, William Harris lodged an ethics complaint against Alderperson Deborah Ryan. The complaint was sent to Leslie Kramer, the city clerk of the City of Wausau, and Alderperson Ryan. The complaint alleged a violation of 2.03.030 sub J of Chapter 2.03 of the city's Code of Ethics for Public Officials and Employees. Specifically, 2.03.030 sub J states, J, no official employee shall, in his or her official capacity, do any act which he or she knows is in excess of his or her lawful authority, or which he or she knows he or she is forbidden by law to do in his or her official capacity. The complaint was referred to the City Ethics Board. The complaint was the subject of several meetings of the Ethics Board. In these meetings, the Ethics Board reviewed the complaint. Following the review, the Ethics Board voted to investigate the complaint. In furtherance of the investigation, the Ethics Board wrote to Alderperson Ryan on February 10, 2022. In that letter, the Ethics Board asked Alderperson Ryan to respond to the complaint. In doing so, it asked Alderperson Ryan to respond with specificity to certain specific allegations made by Mr. Harris. The Ethics Board also wrote to the City Council requesting that they provide the Ethics Board with any relevant information. The Ethics Board received correspondence from Alderperson Ryan through her attorney, from Mr. Harris through his attorney, from various City Council members, and from the Mayor. Alderperson Ryan attended the February 2, 2022 and the March 14, 2022 meetings of the Ethics Board. At those meetings, Alderperson Ryan was offered an opportunity to speak. She declined to speak. After Alderperson Ryan declined to speak on March 14, 2022, the Ethics Board discussed whether it needed or wanted more investigation before it took action on the complaint. No Ethics Board member requested additional information, and the Ethics Board convened into closed session to deliberate. After returning to open session on March 14, 2022, the Ethics Board acted on the complaint. The Ethics Board notes that Ordinance 2.03.010 sub A of the Code of Ethics states in relevant part, A, moral and ethical standards among city public officials and employees are essential to the conduct of representative government, and that standards of conduct for government officials will improve the quality and integrity of public service and promote, strengthen, and nurture the faith and confidence of the citizens of this community in their public officials and employees. In the document entitled Notice of Event Giving Rise to a Claim Pursuant to WIS Stat Section 893.80 Sub 1D Sub A, Mr. Harris sets out the specifics of his claims against Alderperson Ryan. The Ethics Board finds that the critical allegations against Alderperson Ryan are contained within paragraphs 9 through 12 of that document. Those paragraphs state, 9. On June 14, 2021 and June 15, 2021, Deborah Ryan placed multiple telephone calls to Mr. Harris's place of employment, Wisconsin Judicare, Inc., and left a total of 3 messages. She called to speak with the Executive Director, Beth Ann Richland. In one of the meeting's messages, she identified herself as an alderperson and stated that she was calling to speak to the Executive Director about an attorney interfering with legal advice being given to the mayor. In due course, Executive Director Richland called Alderperson Ryan back and they spoke. Paragraph 10. Mr. Harris spoke with the Executive Director about her phone call with Alderperson Ryan. The Executive Director stated that when she called Alderperson Ryan back, Ryan identified the attorney she had accused in the message of interfering with legal advice given to the mayor, engaging in the outside practice of law, and obstructing the city attorney as Mr. Harris. Alderperson Ryan complained that the mayor is not seeking legal advice on the Community for All resolution from the city attorney and instead is relying on Mr. Harris's county board work. Ms. Ryan denigrated the mayor, calling her naive at one point. The Executive Director did not conclude that Alderperson had articulated a factual basis for any of the allegations she was making against Mr. Harris. Paragraph 11. The Executive Director then advised Alderperson Ryan to direct her complaints to the mayor and the city's attorneys. Alderperson Ryan then attempted to pressure the Executive Director to take some employment action against Mr. Harris. However, because the Executive Director found no wrongdoing on Mr. Harris's part, she refused to reprimand, discipline, or terminate Mr. Harris. Alderperson Ryan could not specify what action she wanted the Executive Director to take against Mr. Harris. The Executive Director told her that the information did not substantiate the wrongdoing of which she was accusing Mr. Harris. Alderperson Ryan then became hostile at the end of the call because the Executive Director would not take action against Mr. Harris. Alderperson Ryan threatened the Executive Director that she wouldn't be the Executive Director for very long. Paragraph 12. Alderperson Ryan then went on to contact Alderperson Tom Killian to repeat the false statements that Mr. Harris had been engaging in the outside practice of law, in interfering with the city attorney's giving of legal advice to the mayor, and in providing legal advice to the mayor. Ryan said that they needed to make sure the Community for All resolution that was passed by the City of Wausau's Liberation and Freedom Committee and the Economic Development Committee did not move forward as that version was up for vote. A vote was drafted with the advice and assistance of Mr. Harris, who had been engaging in inappropriate conduct by illegally advising its drafters and vetting the resolution's legality. Those allegations are supported by the affidavit of Beth Ann Richland, dated September 24, 2021. The affidavit is attached to these findings of facts and conclusions of law. The Ethics Board finds that the critical statements by Alderperson Ryan were accusing Mr. Harris of interfering with legal advice to the mayor, accusing Mr. Harris of engaging in the outside practice of law, asking Executive Director Beth Ann Richland to take employment action against Mr. Harris, and threatening the Executive Director by stating that she would not be Executive Director of Wisconsin Judicare, Inc. for very long. The Ethics Board finds that Alderperson Ryan attempted to interfere with Mr. Harris's employment relationship, threatened to interfere with Executive Director Richland's employment, and at least strongly implied that Mr. Harris was operating improperly in his practice of law and in his contacts with the mayor. The Ethics Board finds that Alderperson Ryan's statements and actions were reckless, intentional, reprehensible, and violated the public trust that Chapter 2.03 was designed to promote. Despite being given several opportunities to dispute the statements and actions alleged by Mr. Harris, Alderperson Ryan has not done so. At the March 14, 2022 meeting, her attorney made a non-specific general denial of violation. However, when Alderperson Ryan was offered the opportunity to address the allegations herself, she declined, and her attorney said she stood on the written response he had provided. The Ethics Board has no evidence that the City Council authorized or encouraged Alderperson Ryan to take the actions and say the things that she did. She acted as an individual and without authority from anyone. Alderperson Ryan's statements and actions were contrary to the intent of the city's code of ethics and its spirit. Conclusions of law. While 2.03.010 Declaration of Policy sets out the general purposes and intent of the Code of Ethics, it does not contain specific restrictions. Those are found in 2.03.030 Standards of Conduct. Here, Alderperson Ryan was accused of violating 2.03.030 sub J, which reads, "No official employee shall, in his or her official capacity, do any act which he or she knows is in excess of his or her lawful authority, or which he or she knows he or she is forbidden by law to do in his or her official capacity." In analyzing the code, we recognize the familiar Wisconsin law that when general and specific provisions conflict, the specific provisions control. Such is the case with the Declaration of Policy and 2.03.030 sub J. 2.03.030 sub J is the specific provision, and it controls. The Ethics Board also recognizes that the code allows it to take punitive action under 2.03.090. As the code has punitive aspects, Wisconsin law requires that it be interpreted narrowly. Finally, the Ethics Board recognizes that a Wisconsin city can only act through the vote of its city council. With these principles in mind, the Ethics Board finds that Alderperson Ryan's actions and statements are repugnant and contrary to the Declaration of Policy, but do not violate 2.03.030 sub J, as she was not authorized by the City Council to make the statements and take the actions that she did. As such, the Ethics Board concludes that Alderperson Ryan did not violate the city's Code of Ethics as it's currently written. Accordingly, it dismisses the complaint.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. I think that's comes to the end of our dealing with this case. And copies will be sent to the both the complainant and to the respondent. And that's also, I noticed one thing, I might mention this to Mary, that on item, as I was reading through this, as you were reading through it, where did I have this? There, it needs to include the affidavit that Beth Adler needs to include that.
I don't have it.
I think that was, I made a note of it, but then, did I grab the wrong one? Was that 14? That's what I recall.
We'll find it and send it.
Okay.
I'll find it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, since,
And then we want to agree that what it is, with everything.
pardon?
Here's the copy of it.
Right. Right, okay, good.
Would you all pass it around? and
Sure.
agree that this is what should be attached to the findings?
Well, I read this several times. And you- That's good, that was a great way to get out of it. So I think we're at a conclusion then for this case. And given that, I think it's time, it would be appropriate for Calvin Dexter to return to the board. And I don't know if there any statement or anything you want to make, Calvin, that you had?
everyone has reviewed the affidavit, and do you all agree that that is what should be attached to the findings?
Yes.
Yes.
I want this one back.
Right, we could do that.
Just keep it.
Unless you want to do this formally as a motion? I don't think it's needed, is it? Okay, thank you. Because I just soon not. All right. Kelvin, is there,
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thanks. It's good to be back. And I do have a brief statement, about 3 minutes, relating to the operations of the board. Doesn't require any action by the board. It's simply a statement from me. The people of the city of Wausau have an important interest in holding those serving in city government accountable to ethical standards. That's why the Common Council adopted a code of ethics and established an ethics board to make determinations on complaints of unethical behavior. The people's faith that Wausau government will conduct itself ethically is essential to governance. For that reason, I recuse myself from the board's determination on William Harris's complaint against Alder Deborah Ryan. This was due to my prior association with Mr. Harris. It was necessary, in my opinion, to avoid any appearance of bias in the board's handling of that complaint. During recusal, I joined other Wausau residents as an observer. We observed this board's very careful handling of this complaint. We also observed news reports of Alder Ryan making public comments that could be interpreted as questioning the integrity of the ethics board. The Wausau Pilot and Review reported on March 14th that Alder Ryan issued a press release on March 8th. According to the article, Alder Ryan accused the mayor of handpicking the members of the ethics board, quote, who will act as prosecutors, judges, and juries in Ryan's case. I need to note, without casting any aspersions on the Wausau Pilot and Review, that I have not checked into the accuracy of this news report. But I'd first like to note that Wausau City Ordinance 2.03.040 requires the mayor to appoint the members of the ethics board. It also requires that those appointments are subject to confirmation by the Common Council. I believe that Alder Ryan may have been on the Common Council when the ordinance was adopted, although I'm not certain of that, but I am pretty certain she was on the council when it confirmed the mayor's current appointments to the ethics board. I'd also like to note that this appointment and confirmation process is modeled after a process found in the United States Constitution, used for appointing and confirming cabinet members, federal judges, and Supreme Court justices. So, any inference that the Ethics Board could not properly perform its functions because its members were handpicked by the mayor would be false. Such an inference would be a disservice to the ethics process established by the Common Council. It would be a disservice to the Ethics Board, and most importantly, it would be a disservice to the people of the city of Wausau, who deserve confidence that city officials, including members of the Ethics Board, will perform their duties in an ethical manner. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Okay, any comments? Okay. All right, then we're moving to discussion of agenda items for future board meetings. Anybody have anything? I've got a list, so I'm setting myself up here. But if anybody has any particular things they'd like to see on, and in fact, when I get through my list, then, and mostly my list is to see what things you approve of, because one of the things I've found out is it's almost impossible for us to discuss agenda items between meetings, because that violates the open meetings law. So I thought, well, let's discuss agenda items, what do we want on the next agenda. At the end of a meeting, we can discuss the next agenda. That's my brilliant idea here. I don't know if you go for that. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
may I be excused?
Oh, certainly, I'm sorry. I like having you around. But you may want to get back to Madison.
Thank you.
Right, and we do have an alternative, don't we? An alternate. Okay, Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. No. Thank you. Take care. Drive safely and. Great, thank you. So that's, you may want to note that there was a change of advising attorneys at this point. It's great. I hope you all know Ann Jacobson, okay? Do you know who we all are?
Yes,
You think we don't need to introduce ourselves?
I don't think so.
Oh. Right,
You're Kay Palmer,
Kay
okay,
Palmer,
very
yeah.
nice, thank you.
okay, great. Well, thank you. So let's, anybody have agenda items that,
Well, I guess just a more general one, as we were going through the ethics code ordinance, whether, this would be a question for our city attorney, whether we can recommend changes and how we would go about doing that to make it a little bit more user-friendly, first of all, and then just some of these issues that we came up with, and how we would go about looking at modifying the city code, what the process is for doing that.
It's a very good question, Robin. Typically, I mean, I went back in a little bit of preparation for this to look at the duties of the board, which are to prescribe and make available forms for use under the chapter, accept information related to the chapter, investigate violations of the chapter, and maintain a record of its investigation and its proceedings. I do not recall with this particular board them ever convening except to consider and investigate complaints. However, in the long distant past, we have had other committees, sometimes just citizen committees, recommend ordinance changes if that's what you're driving at. And then make that recommendation, I guess, to the city attorney's office, because by statute, we're charged with drafting the ordinances and attesting to their enforceability at the end of the day. But you've done a marvelous job. You've spent a lot of time at this and investigating it and worked through this chapter. And we're aware as well that there are some updates and things that may need to be made to this chapter. So I would entertain hearing your recommendations at a future meeting, if you'd like to share and discuss those and make recommendations to the,
to this common council?
I guess
To
they
you-
would, I
to
guess
you-
they
to
would
you.
be to the council. You're gonna
Right,
make,
right,
you're gonna
yeah.
make recommendations to the common council. You're not a standing committee. We could put it through a standing committee or just send it right to council and suspend the rules. But the city attorney's office would
Right.
review the changes, of course, but I'd be happy to accept any
Right.
concerns or questions or recommendations that you may have for making those changes.
And would we need to present those recommended changes as a uniform board? So that would be at a next board meeting, we would start discussing some of that, and we'd have to present that, these are the changes we would like to see made.
That's what I would recommend you do, yes. Take motions, have discussions, take possible action, do it by motion. Make those recommendations, and then I would take them straight to council.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, that helps a lot.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess, obviously, we would ask, if we had a recommended change on something, we would be seeking your legal advice on that, obviously, to how to make it fit within the
Sure.
ordinance and everything. Yeah.
Sure, but we would be, I mean, like I said, our office was already looking at, because you hadn't, this board hadn't met in at least 5 years or longer. Some of the difficulties that you'd mentioned going along this time had already started looking at this, because we subscribe to the Muni Code Library, so we have access to every other municipality's ethics codes as well. I mean, that's just one source we would consider in redrafting our own.
Yeah.
And the extent to which we would do that is uncertain at this point, but because you just dealt with it in practicality, we would like to hear your discussion and your recommendations with regard to changes that should be made to it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, that was definitely one item on my list, too. Thank you. Anybody?
Chairman Hostler, I just would like to state that while we may not be required to do anything other than consider ethical complaints, I think we could provide a valuable service to the city based on your experience with this complaint that you handle, I know a number of shortcomings in the current ordinance, I think, were identified. And in addition, I mentioned to you that I have an idea, based on my experience in recusing myself from those proceedings, that there are standards or criteria that could be considered in the future by other members of the board in making a decision about recusing themselves. That might be, I mean, as I'm envisioning it, it would not be some kind of mandatory requirement on board members, but rather guidance. And being guidance, perhaps that's something that could be formulated as a rule of the ethics board.
Right.
As opposed to an ordinance. So I like the idea. I think we could do
Yeah,
good things
that'd
for
be
the
another
city.
agenda item, is the recusal rule, well, guidelines for recusal. Because
Yeah.
that actually would, I mean, I would probably like that too, because I was maybe in some doubt, but not much, about, I have my own connection, I have no connection with Alder Ryan, I had none. I'm getting one, but I have no connection with her before. But I had, I serve on a board with the Supervisor Harris, but I don't have much contact with her. So, and I ran that past Ted, and he thought it didn't really mean much, and I thought, good. Is that, I'm not, I try to, and also I must say, I deliberately did not examine anything on the Community for All proposals. I mean, before I kind of put it off, and once I had this case in front of me, I stayed away from it. It's like, do not even look at it. No, that's great. Okay, so that would be another one that, there'd be an agenda item that we could start looking at, is guidelines for that. At some point, we should, when we get reconstituted, I like that, reconstitute. When we get reconstituted, we should probably go through an election of a chair and/or vice chair. This project, I think, I'd like to bring up some items other than, well, including the ones that have been mentioned. I myself have been interested in what alternates are to do and what status they have. Because one thing I thought was, well, there is the problem that when people recuse themselves and there's too many, you don't have a large enough board to function. It looks like our size for functioning is about 4. And that, I mean, that's ideal, that at least in the present ordinance, in order to hold a hearing, there have to be 4 active members. So that would be one thing I want to know, how we use alternates. Because one of the ideas that hit me when, I forgot who it was who suggested that, it was one of the alder people suggested that we have alternates. I'll think of his name in a minute. But, and I thought, well, we could either do that or expand the board. So a couple of ways of approaching it is, I would like to better define what alternates are to do. I could tell you from if you look up the statute, it has been changed, and I think it's now officially changed, to include alternates and what the status of alternates are, status of the alternates is. And that's in there, but also you can find, if you look, what changes have been made. It'll tell you which things are recent changes. And here, I might read this. Two similarly qualified alternate members may be appointed by the mayor and subject to confirmation by common council. So the same process. Members should be from diverse segments of the community. Each board member shall be, oh, wait a minute, I just jumped backwards. The mayor shall designate such alternate members as first and second alternates. Alternate members shall act with full authority when a member of the board or other alternate member is absent or abstains from voting or acting under this chapter because of conflict of interest. Okay? So it looks like it would be nice if Ms. Palmer would show up. And then if somebody decides they're not going to vote on this particular session, then you could vote. So that's the way I understand this. The other thing I would, then it talks about when the appointments are. The first alternate, that's Kay Palmer, has 5-year. The second one gets 2 years, okay? As far as I understand, that's the way it's written. But one of my thoughts is, what I like is, we are citizens. I mean, we're to represent the citizens in what we do. For one thing, we're to represent, this would be demeaning to the government, to respect for the government, something like that. And then we try to give a reading because we're part of the citizens. And that's one reason I would like to see alternates used more widely. That is, it's probably unusual to have an alternate who's not acting. I want to hear the voices of the alternates. Because I think whether the alternate person can vote or not, alternate member can vote or not, I still want to hear what the person has to say. I found myself very illuminated by the closed session in the previous meeting, by things that Kay had to say. Thank you very much. So I'd kind of like to see that. But this is a thing that we might either make as rules for ourselves or as things that would be part of a, part of a change in the ordinance. The ordinance could define that if it wanted to. But, yes.
I'm wondering, Doug, do you have any news for us? Maybe I've just been out of the loop, but any news on what the plans are for a permanent replacement for Mary Tao's position on this board?
It's a good question, thank you. That's one reason later on I was going to advise we wait at least a month, because there is a process, I don't know exactly what state it's in, to get an alternate, a replacement for Mary Tao and an alternate number 2.
Perhaps that's another agenda item for our next meeting. We could investigate and see where we're at and see if we have any recommendation to the Common Council.
Common Council. But I'm thinking it would be a good idea to wait at least a month for our next meeting. So because there'll be I think there'll be 2 meetings of the Common Council between that. If I wait a month, there are two meetings.
Well, there's actually 3. April 12th, April 5th is the election, April 12th is the last meeting of this term, and then April 19th is the organizational meeting, and then April 26th is the first meeting of the new term.
New term, okay. So I'm trying to think where would be a good place for us to be if we want to we want to give the mayor time and the council time to get us in.
Well, the status is those openings, when there are openings, are continually checked. They're kept on a spreadsheet. And so the mayor's made aware of which 40 of the commissions, committees, and boards are missing members or have expired members. They also maintain on the city's website the ability for people to sign up and indicate an interest for a particular committee. That's how she started out looking at the folks that had applied for this committee, but some had already moved away and so forth. Her intent was to fill it completely, but to my knowledge, no one else has expressed an interest, and she hasn't been able to find anyone yet, or she would have made that appointment by now and brought it to council. So it's ongoing, but we haven't found anyone yet.
Okay,
Well, isn't it possible that the mayor might appoint Kay as a permanent member, or is it because she's now an alternate, she can't serve as a permanent member? I don't know why that wouldn't be an option, but if she's willing.
well,
I don't know why that couldn't be an option either, but you're right. Right now, she was appointed as
Right.
alternate number 1, I think, right? Or 2, I'm not even sure. 1?
I think it's actually 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought, was that
Really?
it was 2, yeah.
It's
And the
alternate.
number 1 person was the gentleman that moved to California.
that was,
So we'd have to look into that as well.
all right.
So right now, you're on your agenda item to decide what you want for future agenda items.
Right.
So, yeah, we should be real careful to refrain from discussing them, but
Well, yeah,
we can list them.
right, and then also I could see what, then we can go through and see which ones we want to do at our next meeting.
Could we have a general agenda item for all of us to bring our ideas to the next meeting
Well,
as to areas that we would like to discuss? Do we need to be more specific than that?
No, I think you could come up with an agenda item that says something like discussion and possible action on recommended ordinance amendments or something like that to Chapter 203. That would sufficiently inform the public of what
What
you
was
were
going
about
on.
to discuss, and if you didn't reach any consensus or any, I mean, if you don't get a motion and you don't all agree and you
Right.
just want to use that time, you don't have to take action,
That'd
but
be
it's
possible.
on there if you do.
This is a possible agenda item, it's an agenda item for possible amendments to the chapter that defines this. Okay. That's
If I
good.
could, just for a somewhat more clear statement, an agenda item to discuss ideas for possible amendments to the ordinances relating to the Ethics Board, also possible Ethics Board rules, also status of the, of filling the vacancy for the permanent member of the, for the regular permanent member of the Ethics Board.
Well, that would be an announcement of whatever, what the status is.
Well, what I'm envisioning there is if we don't have any update that assures us that we're going to get another permanent
Right.
member, that we make some recommendation
Okay.
to the mayor and the city council that they get their act together and get that done.
Right, right. Yeah, sure, we could do that. That sounds like a reasonable agenda item. Let me try to, another big thing, another big item with changing, a recommendation for a change has to do with, I call it the flow chart for making decisions, like in cases we looked at, and we found out we have to stop and inform somebody, and then go, we couldn't do two things at the same time. For instance, we couldn't decide to make an investigation and decide what form it was. We couldn't do it at the same meeting because of the way the ordinance is written. And that bugged our advisor and us too. It just led to tons of meetings. So that would be another item. I mean, we could leave it as a very general item, the discussion of possible changes. I just wanted to tell how many there are that I know of, which is a lot. Well, yeah, I'll skip that. So I think with Ted, we found there was a contradiction. There's some places where it says one thing and then it says something else. Rewarding it where it's needed to be clear. Let's see, probably, we'll just leave that one. There's another project that I'd like you to think about, because doing some investigation, I found out that I wanted to talk to the Human Relations Department and to Tony Vanderboom and find out that we could work together with them. It looks like HR would like help in a lot of things. And when I looked at the code that is given to new people, it's essentially the ordinance that we have, which is hard to read anyhow. And I think when I looked at what they're required to sign, I think it just said they had to say they received it. I'm not sure that it actually says they have to understand it. So I thought we could work with, as a project, we work with HR to create a more readable and I think broader kind of idea of what ethics covers. I mean, maybe that's another point I should make, that I've found another change I want to make in the ethics ordinance itself, is it focuses almost entirely on making money, not, and I think there's so much else, as we just saw, there's so much else that really ethics would tell you not to do. So let's give many more examples, if that's what we're going to do, than the ones that focus almost entirely on making money illegitimately, which is, it's a concern, but I think there are many others, and I would like to see that kind of change made too. There we go. So the code of the agenda item thinking of is producing a more reader-friendly code of ethics, which includes much more than an inappropriate financial reward. The other thing that might want to think about is you could look to the core values of the Wausau core values. Might look at that. That's another thing I can have you look at, because it talks about professionalism, which I think covers a lot of stuff. So I might recommend doing that. But that's all under the project of working on the code of ethics that's given to all employees. And I think that'd be a great project. There's another project I don't know if we ever do, but it's listed in the present ordinance that we're supposed to maintain a current list of persons doing business or engaged in transaction with or affecting the city for use by officials, employees, a list. I'm a little puzzled as to what that's supposed to do, but we could do that one. And I think that's about, the other items would be just informational. The other thing, well, actually, one thing I thought we might think about is setting some kind of regular set for our board meetings, like we'd have at least quarterly board meetings. We've had plenty more than that, but I'm just thinking if we met throughout the year and discussed projects we want to undertake, that might keep us more useful. And make it less likely the board disappear. I don't want to overwork anyone, because us retired people, probably, we have to be careful with people that aren't retired, don't you think? Don't you, especially any of these that have to deal with children? Oh, my God. So anyhow, so are they, is that, it sounds like there's a basic agreement on items for the next agenda. Some of them we can decide we won't get to. I mean, is anybody interested in the project that I came up with of redoing the code of ethics that is handed to employees?
I think that it is, in a lot of employment contracts, there is always a provision on, or generally, there's a provision on ethics. So I do think that is nice to be able to do and to hand from the HR department.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it needs to be an extremely long document. I mean, it can refer back to the ordinance, essentially, if they're not getting handed the whole ordinance.
But that could be an agenda item.
Yes, I think just having it on an agenda item to talk, to continue discussion
Right,
on it,
right,
yes.
yeah. Okay. So are there any other agenda items people have in mind? Or that, I think there's enough. And I'm trying to think of my phone. Oh, yeah, good. So we need to set the date of the next meeting?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a month. I don't know what that sound reasonable? What?
When did you say?
Well, about a month from now, you might look for, I like her. 'Cause she's very helpful.
Probably have the next meeting, we probably won't have it, now that the case, which was attracting most of the attention of the public, when you guys have your next meeting, we'll probably have it in the boardroom upstairs, which is a little easier
Right,
to schedule, because,
okay,
but we need to decide that quick, because there's another meeting in here at 5:30.
okay,
So
all right.
I would suggest with the elections and everything going on in April that we maybe go out to at least mid-May.
Okay,
I don't know, as a proposal.
that's fine. Anybody, does mid-May look okay? You guys have any,
Like if we could look at May 18th possibly?
oh my gosh, now I've got to get my phone. Thank you very much.
I'm expecting to be out of town that
Th-
week.
That week. Maybe
Let's say May, we're going,
Monday, May 23rd.
okay, what do I have Monday, May 23rd?
That works for me.
Bob Hostler's birthday, a lot of people's birthday. Looks like I could do it. Monday, May.
I could do afternoon or morning or afternoon.
It's good. I think afternoon is preferable
Right.
for me.
It doesn't make much difference to me. At this point, I'm not scheduled, but I have some dental surgery that hasn't been scheduled yet, so
Oh.
that's the only thing that might interfere.
Okay,
So if we could look at May 23rd in the afternoon, like at 3 o'clock?
Works.
that's all right. What do you think, Mary, that looks all right? Okay, 3 PM and the 23rd, okay. Great,
And Attorney Jacobson, do you help prepare the minutes, or the agenda items, I'm sorry, the agenda items for the next agenda, or is that something Doug was
If I'm
preparing that.
requested to do so or ask
Okay.
for advice or help or guidance, I would. It's not a general duty that I do with all
Okay.
40 boards that
Yes, I
meet, but
can
if they
imagine.
request help, yes, we will help them draft
Yeah.
agenda items.
Gotcha.
I'll run them.
Okay.
It
Sounds-
just looks like it's sane.
Sounds good.
And Doug, I assume you will make sure that the agenda also includes an item for selection of a permanent chair,
Yeah, that was actually, I don't, I guess.
which
I
I'll
did-
nominate you for again.
Let's see what, look at that. Yeah, okay, we can do that. Okay, I hope I have that right. So I basically,
I've got it all recorded. No.
okay, right, thank you. And she's very good. I do like her. Is that okay to say publicly?
It's on the record now.
Okay,
Well,
no,
if there's nothing else, I'll make a motion to
adjourn?
adjourn the meeting.
great. Any second to that motion?
I would second.
Okay, no discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're done.